Welcome to, I believe, what is the 13th episode of the Love Bomb Chat series. Tonight is my first night with a Love Bomb Chat with more than one guest, which I'm very excited about. So I am joined by 2ToRamble and specifically Rich and Austin. So would you guys like to introduce yourselves in case people just know you as collectively 2ToRamble?
Yeah.
So we
Rich,
know
how about
who
you introduce me, I introduce you.
Got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
This guy is Austin. He likes books that basically Red Rising. He likes Red Rising and Red Rising-esque books. So if there's not enough action and fighting, he's out.
Gotcha.
But also occasionally, sometimes he likes a Piranesi. He breaks the mold occasionally.
Okay.
But that's Austin.
So
Yeah.
Richard is the type of reader that the harder the book is to read and the longer it is, the more people it weeds out, and therefore he can look down on you. So a series that is so long that he knows it's so specific and so many, like he can bring it up at a cocktail party and be like, have you read book 17 of the trilogy? And like, wait, trilogy isn't a 17-book series, and you got to be linguist. Richard, he has his taste. We just set up this and we kind of adjusted the books in the background.
It's looking real sharp, so it's coming together.
But we come together. I guess we can unite with this. We both love Stormlight and Discworld, and recently Dungeon Crawler. Carl, we'll have a ton to love, bomb, and gush about. But Laura, do you have a series that one of the ones we named or a different one that you typically talk about a lot is your favorite?
So I am known to ramble about Stormlight quite a bit, but I gushed profusely about First Law by Joe Abercrombie. Like I friggin' love a Joe Abercrombie character. Anything that man touches, for the most part, I'm pretty good with. Have you guys read First Law?
I've read First Law myself.
I'm starting it literally in a week.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. You're in for such a treat. It's so delightful.
Now, here's the more not controversial, but I take the opposite route a lot of people do with book one, Blade itself. A lot of people say that it is like their least favorite.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. It's honestly one of my favorite of the trilogies, just for the plot. I love this plot structure, and everyone else says I'm crazy.
No,
that they think that's the worst
absolutely
part.
not crazy. That is the correct opinion. And so I have the hot take opinion because he has the two trilogies, right? He's got First Law, Age of Madness, and then he's got these three standalones that bridge them. Standalones, right? I think that could be a new thing that works for First Law. Yeah. But the three of them that bridge it in the middle. And my hot take opinion is that I prefer the original trilogy to Age of Madness, which a lot of people prefer because Age of Madness has more of a traditional arc. Whereas First Law is really meandery, and he's saying to you, please just trust me. This is a good story, but it's going to take us a long time to get there. And I'm like, I'm in. You sold me. And The Heroes, which is the second of the standalone books, other than the Blade itself, is my favorite of all of them. It's just so good.
I have heard that repeated several times by other people, and it's my next. That's my next Joe Abercrombie book. So
you guys are in for such good reads. I'm psyched for the both of you.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So the question that I typically like to jump off with is there something recently that you have been reading or are reading, have read that you are absolutely loving, can't stop talking about? What is it? Tell us about it.
I got you, Rich.
Oh, thanks.
Super short story. Rich and I just read this because we were on the podcast. We were talking about we were talking with Ken Liu, author like The Grace of Kings and The Paper Menagerie. And this is a short story that Rich and I just read. It's 20 pages long. So if anybody's watching right now, keep watching to give Laura and her channel, and subscribe to her channel and everything. After this, go read this because it's one of these, like, Laura, if you read this Paper Menagerie,
I have not yet. Ken Liu is on my list for this year. I recently started a book club with my husband, and we have Dandelion Dynasty book 1 as part of that. Don't know when it's coming up yet, but before we read it on the month it comes up, I'm going to do Paper Menagerie. So it's just like a big Ken month.
Yeah, you should be able to find it online on I believe one of the magazines purchased it, but you can also purchase an anthology.
Yeah,
I will get the anthology.
A bunch of short stories in here. And the best part about this, besides it being just an amazing, thought-provoking short story, who's it? Simon Dinosaur saying Paper Menagerie is on my TBR. Yeah, the great thing about it is it's so annoying. Yesterday for July 4th, I was hanging out with some friends, and I was able to actually recommend the short story because you can't go to someone and be like, hey, read this Joe Abercrombie book. Yes, we can. Yeah. We like our fantasy and we can really get into it. But for somebody that doesn't love to read, or maybe fantasy's not their thing, you can always recommend a way more condensed short stories, 10-minute read, not even. Yeah. And Rich and I are you agree with me that how would you explain it without spoiling? Convince someone to read it.
It is a light fantasy story that's focusing on the ideas of regret, of motherhood, and specifically focuses on a type of story that is not often told with, for lack of a better term, mail order brides and their perspective. And then I don't want to say too much more if I can, but overall it's a really quickly it's hard to I feel restrained. I feel chained down to talk about, but
I know, overall, I'm sorry.
The characters themselves in page 1, you feel such an emotional pull toward. For one of them, you feel a great sympathy for, and another you feel a great frustration and anger. But over time, the story becomes real.
Yeah.
In a very quick amount of time. And then I think just the imagery is really adorable to imagine.
I answered the question from the commenter.
Yeah,
it goes from page 178 to 193, so it's literally less than 20 pages.
There you go.
Yeah. Sorry,
Robo reader.
You off there.
No, you're fine. Bookworm raves about Ken Liu all the time. She interviews him all the time and all kinds of stuff. And I know she just reread Paper Menagerie and was gushing about it again. So it's pretty common. Most people I feel like that encounter that say it is devastating, upsetting, and excellent. Those tend to be the descriptors.
Yeah, I don't know about both of you, but I look forward to when someone says, hey, this book could make you cry, or this short story can make you cry. I want to feel something. I want to feel whether it's a positive or negative emotion. And I can't say this is one of those where it got me almost there. I don't know, it was almost there, because there's plenty of books that make us Sword of Kaigen, right? Where is it? Right above my head. That's one of them right there. Gush session. But yeah, Laura, what's a book that makes you cry?
Okay, so here's a fun story, because I know you guys just read ACOTAR and you had your experience with ACOTAR. Book 1 of ACOTAR does not make me cry, but the 5th book in ACOTAR makes me cry because it deals heavily with the topic of a certain type of assault, and it is targeted against women, and the way that it was handled was very, very emotional, I felt like. And recently, I have never been a crier with reading until this year. It was really funny because I did the mid-year freakout book tag last year, and I was like, I don't cry, guys. I'm sorry. And then this year, I was like, turn on the waterworks. I'm just going to be a blubbering mess every time I read. And I cried really horribly with a contemporary romance book, which is the first time I've ever tried contemporary romance this year. It was a new genre for me, with Emily Henry's Happy Place. Because it dealt quite a bit with trauma and loss of a family member, and the way that it hit home, I was like, oh, those are all the feelings that I have, and it's hitting me in all of them. So those two have been the big ones this year. But the first book that ever actively made me cry was Flowers for Algernon, because it's just actively upsetting.
That brings me back. That high school was fun.
Yes, wasn't it? Exactly. And that's when I had to read it, and I was like, this has been a joy. Thank you for making me read this book.
We not only read it, but for my high school theater troupe had short plays that we did at one point. And we actually did Flowers for Algernon as a a little like a half, not a full play. You know, it's a short thing, but still, it was rough.
Oh man. See, for me, like I want to feel something like what you're saying, Austin. But for me, the thing, like, I would rather feel atmosphere when I'm reading. Like, that for me is a really big pull is, do I feel like I've been immersed in whatever world this is? And I know that you have recently had a Piranesi gush. And that for me was probably the most atmospheric book that I've read in the last couple years. Like that ticked all the boxes. It is such a fantastic book.
That is a valid opinion. And I actually recently reread it just for our like updated review. We reviewed it before, and then we're like, you know, it's just been getting better in our minds.
Yeah.
Got to reread it. And yeah, it's one of those books that just convinces you that it is real. It pulls you into the present and doesn't really let go. Even though a lot of it's a great combination of the world handled in it. If you looked at the world through a different character's eyes, it would look, it wouldn't feel as real. But combination of a very interesting world with the perfect POV character made it come alive.
Oh, so true. So true. Austin, do you have anything to add about that?
Do you like the atmosphere like Piranesi? Something that, sorry. Do you like the Piranesi atmosphere where it's atmospheric in a dreamlike way? Do you also like a more horror-esque atmosphere?
So I didn't think I did. I didn't think I did, which is funny because I will not watch horror films like in life and things like that because I am the person that if it's a psychological horror and I'm like, oh, that could happen, I'm immediately freaked out. And like I will just get way too invested into that thing. So for me, I don't really love that. But I'm in a writer's group and my friend in that group writes horror. And when he was like, you're gonna be reading horror, are you gonna be good? And I was like, oh, I'll get through it, I'll manage. And I ended up really enjoying it. So I was like, okay, maybe it works for me. But in terms of the Piranesi vibe, it's the dreamlike vibe where I was like, is this happening? Is it not really happening? And the thing that I really love about that book is that everyone I've spoken to had a different concept of what the mystery was. And I was like, that's amazing. Like everyone had this unique experience while reading this book, just going, well, it's probably this, but no, it's probably this. And each one is valid. And they were all really, really cool theories, which I love.
Couldn't agree more. That was the best part with us. And having a book club, like you said, you just created with your husband. We on our book club, that was our favorite one to date, probably. There's other ones.
There's a couple others, but that was one of the most fun to discuss and brought the most value. It wasn't just a simple like it, dislike it kind of sides. It was every single person had a different view of what the book was trying to say. Also, whether or not the book was literal or figurative, or what was like you said, the mystery of it. What exactly is it? Everyone had a different perspective, and it just opened my eyes of, oh my God, you can read this book in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
I think the only universal thing was the atmosphere. And he's going to that kind of dreamlike atmosphere we all felt. And the point Rich was making you're making the point of, if it's a different character, the world doesn't feel as real. Now, if it's a different character, I could easily see that atmosphere we're not spoiling the book for any viewers, so keep this super light. But having that atmosphere from a different character, that could be a horror novel.
Oh yeah, so, for sure.
Very well could be.
The way that it comes off kind of mysterious and almost like you want to escape there, but also realistically, no, that would be horrifying. But the way that
I don't want to be stuck there.
It makes it seem so grand and like, you want to escape there. So it's just a really greatly weirdly done. I feel like Stephen King would have turned this into some weird, convoluted, scary thing, whereas Susanna Clarke made this enchanting, like the book says. So
absolutely. And I go into most of my books blind, which is a really unique experience for me. Like I don't read back covers or blurbs. I'm just like, cool, that might be something I want to read. And the only thing I knew about that book is that it was an epistolary format and that it took place in a house. And in my brain, I thought it was like Encanto type house. And I was so wrong when I started reading. And I was like, this is 1,000 times better than I ever could have expected. So I freaking love that book. It's on our potential books for our book club as well, because my husband hasn't read it. And I've been nagging him for a year and a half now, where I'm like, please read this book because it's incredible and I love it so much and I want to talk to you about it. Gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been, I think we've been putting off combative robo reader here.
Yes. Yeah. So have you guys read Robin Hobb?
I have. So I've read the first 2 books, so Assassin's Apprentice and Assassin's Quest. Though it's been a long time, I really enjoy my story of it. I really liked the first book, Robin Hobb. Like, I was just so impressed with her writing and the world that we were kind of putting into, but the plot was a little off for me. Of this, it didn't click.
That's
second
fair.
book, better plot, characters. It was kind of devastating, like emotionally speaking. Oof.
Yeah.
And then by the end of that book, I was spoiled by going online, looking at other things. I was spoiled for something in the third book. And it just made me go, I'm not going to jump to the third book quite yet. And I put it off too long, and then it just got away from me. Hopefully I get back to it fairly soon.
That's totally fair.
If I'm not mistaken, how many books are in that? Is it it's more than a trilogy, right? It's
there are similar.
Realm of the Elderlings, yeah. Like
the
17
first
books.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the first 3, there's a trilogy, and then there's another, like, Live Ship Traders is not next, but it's
there's Tawny Man, there's Fitz, I don't know if Fitz and the Fool is a separate one, and then Live Ship. I believe it's 16 or 17 books in total. Like, it's significant. 16, I'm being told. So there we go. I also have not read her yet.
Oh, Levy. Hey, Levy.
Levy's from our Patreon.
Hello. Yeah, so 16 books in one novella. So I'm so close. I have not read Hobb. It is something that I openly talk about on my channel. Animal cruelty of any kind is a really big thing for me to get around in literature, in media, any form of consumption in life. Like, I don't do well with it. So I have been warned for that series. So it is something that I need to be in the right emotional headspace to sit down and read. And because there's just so many books that are waiting to be read right now that aren't happening with that, I'm like, those have been given priority. But eventually I will get to Hobb. It just has not happened yet.
I have not gone to Hobb quite yet. It's very bottom of my TBR, like bottom. Only reason is you mentioned this. Maybe we could talk about this during the live here. But the main character of the fantasy novel I'm writing, their name's Fitz, and I don't want to combine the Fitz from Robin Hobb's into the Fitz I'm writing. So I'm trying to, like, separate that. I know it's just a name, but it's just a name. It shouldn't be that serious. But keep that in mind. I always wonder what it's like for people who have names that are same of fantasy characters. Like, if your name's Paul and then you read Dune, or if your name's, I always wonder if there's just a little bit of weirdness when you're hearing a name that, like, if you heard Richard all the time.
It does inflate my ego when I hear about King Richard.
Yes.
I was going to say, if you're reading historical fiction, chances are you're definitely going to encounter many Richards. Okay, so I want to know how the two of you met and, like, this love of fantasy / books / sci-fi came about. Like, what was the origin for that?
Well, we both kind of have a similar story with reading and fantasy of when we were younger, elementary, middle school, somewhat of high school. We read quite a bit of fantasy fiction and all that. And then during college, kind of dropped off. For me, it was like high school, dropped off of reading for the most part through college. And then I started picking fantasy back up in after I graduated college. I was doing a job where I had a lot of night shift work, and so I had a lot of time to read. I had to do not only did it was the perfect scenario of, I'm on the night shift, I have a lot of spare time, and I'm not allowed to have a phone, not allowed to have a computer, and I can't talk to anybody. there's not many other options other than reading. So
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I just started reading a bunch, and Austin recommended me a couple different books. Then he started reading them again, sparked that love back into
yeah, we
reading.
sparked it with each other. That's definitely how it happened, because before we met, obviously, we had our high school. I think the first time I was introduced to fantasy was Lord of the Rings movies when I was maybe 5, or just my dad was showing them on like our small little TV, and fell in love with that. Those were my favorite movies always. And then I always got into those self-insert kind of YA novels with your Percy Jackson, your
Pendragon.
Even though I was in that phase of the Maze Runner, Divergent, Hunger Games.
That was your age group, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so reading a lot of that. And I feel like high school, we wanted to escape, and then college is coming up. Obviously, technology gets in the way, and we stop reading.
YouTube ruined my reading
ruins
habit.
us. And I feel like there's a way, we're going to college. We need to enter the real world. Real world sucks. Let's go back into fantasy. So
sure.
The little cycle. So we didn't, I guess our love of fantasy, we didn't go in and find like a club, or we're both really reading it. We kind of both already had this in the past, and then just at the same time started reading again. Yeah.
Yeah. There was
Go ahead.
There was just at some point, like the first book that got me back into reading again was The Way of Kings. And it was a book that somebody else handed to Austin. They gave you the book. And then I was complaining to him about, work is so boring. I have nothing to do. And he was like, hey, this is a thick book. Here you go.
Sure is. It sure is. And it's the smallest one of the series.
Can you imagine it? Not reading for years, really, for fun. And then the first book you pick up, Way of Kings.
That
so was funny. A rough place to start, but it was great.
So a lot of people in and on BookTube, when you talk to them and they're like, oh yeah, I had a big lapse of time from reading and I came back to it. The series that brought me back into it was Mistborn. Like Mistborn is such a common answer for people. So it's funny to hear Way of Kings, because it's the mega epic of Sanderson. It's the big one, right? Where it's like Mistborn is a much easier gateway, I feel like, where it's like you're going all in when you're starting with Stormlight.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a strange thing of now I can sit and read for long stretches of time. Like I can read for hours, just sit in I can focus on reading for a long period of time. When I first started, I struggled, like actually eyes on the page for longer than 15 minutes. I'd have to take breaks of reading. And it's interesting that that's a skill.
It is.
Focusing on a book for a long period of time.
It's a muscle memory thing. It's actually training your eyes to be able to do that. So yeah, it does take time.
Do you have a favorite way of reading? Do you audiobook? Do you read physical? Do you have a certain reading spot?
I do have a certain reading spot. I have a chair in my living room that I really like to be in. I used to be 100% physical. And then last year I picked up the audiobook for First Law, specifically the third book, Last Argument of Kings. And I sat back and I thought about it and I was like, why have I not been doing this? Like this is a really fun way to have stories told to you. And specifically because Pacey's narration is just so excellent that it felt like an entire cast of characters in my head that I was like, well, I'm going to be super selective here about which narrators I really like. And then I started listening to Andy Serkis's retelling of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And then I was just like, I'm just going to try all things audiobook. And I found that for the most part, like I really loved audiobooks, and I don't know why it took me so long. So now it has been mostly over this year. I've done 2 books in physical format, but that's because I've been having an issue with my glasses in my eyes that I can't sit and read for extended periods of time like an actual book. I can read better on my computer. So I've been doing immersion reading with audio and ebook for the most part. But I'm hoping my new prescription is supposed to be coming in like next week. So I'm like, physical books will be happening again soon, because there are certain series like A Song of Ice and Fire that I don't do well with that audiobook narrator at all. So I'm like, and I'm wanting to reread the series. So I'm like, I need to actually have I want to have the physical book in front of me. Like that's one that I'm like, I want that experience. How about you guys?
I've heard nothing but great things about the Joe Abercrombie narrator.
Oh,
I think
so good.
Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, who says his favorite book narrators, and this might convince you to do. Have you ever done the audiobooks with?
Oh yeah.
Oh, then never mind.
Oh no, yeah. I highly recommend the audiobook for First Law. It's almost
incredible.
required.
It's incredible.
Yeah, he was saying that his favorite audiobook narrator goes number 1, the First Law, the Joe Abercrombie narrator, and then Jeff Hayes from Dungeon Crawler Carl. He even puts we've been listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl, and the audiobook there, Jeff Hayes, who does the narration, stellar.
Arguably one of the best narrators in the field today.
I'm going to be listening to that really soon. My friend sent Brian, if you are rewatching this at some point from BellTube, he sent me the audiobook for it. He gave me a credit for it, which was really, really wonderful. So I am excited to listen to it because I've never done lit RPGs. So I'm curious to venture into that genre.
This was our first as well.
This is a good place to start. I hear like it's very different from lit RPGs. It breaks some of the genres. It's mostly focused on its characters and its world, and there's other things that go to it.
Yeah, so I will. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Osmond. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I do audiobooks when it's a narrator I can also listen to. There's some just like you with the Game of Thrones. There's some books I can't listen to as well, and sometimes just the voice, if it's too monotone and just going the same pace and all the same, that's tougher for me. Where I need a little bit of acting.
That's totally fair. So Glocta's voice in First Law, you will meet him, and I read the first 2 books physically and had a very clear idea of how this character sounded in my head, and then listened to Stephen Pacey, and I was like, I was wrong. Like, this is how this man is supposed to sound. Oh my gosh. So I'm really excited for you to start First Law, and I really do hope that you do it as audio.
Awesome. Should I?
Yes,
I should.
Oh, definitely.
So don't touch the physical.
No. Unless you immersion read them. You can immersion read it if you want to.
Okay.
But yeah.
I so that means I have to pause Dungeon Crawler Carl. You do know that. I don't know.
Speed read. You
finish Dungeon Crawler, then go to First Law. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
It's settled. But yes, I do a weird thing. I don't know if anybody else does this, but when I physical read, I like to walk while reading. I'm a walk reader, and it's weird. Oh, okay. It's
very weird.
It kind of gets me moving, and it just gets me in a good pace. And I like to think like, okay, I try to finish a page every time I finish a loop, and it gets me into a good little pace and cadence to make sure I'm still good at reading at a good pace versus like sometimes you kind of glaze over a page, and you think you just read it, but you have to go over and read it again.
Yes.
So it's almost a good way of keeping me active. I like it.
That's awesome. See, I will do that. That's my audiobook thing where I'm like, I can be exercising, I can be at the gym, like, and I'm fully engaged. Like I'm doing something that I do not want to be doing, but in here I am somewhere else and it is a great time. I love audiobooks for that, just because it can really set that tone for me in a way that sometimes reading physically can't, because I find with the physical reading, I can get I've got ADD, so I can get distracted by like a cat coming into the room, or if I hear my kid upstairs, or if my husband's walking by, and I'm just like, there's all this sensory input around me and I want to engage with all of it. Whereas as soon as I put the earbuds in, it sounds weird, but that's when my brain goes quiet, because I'm so hyper focused on listening to the words being told to me that I can immerse myself, I feel like, on a deeper level with audiobooks than I can with a physical book. And I feel like I get the most out of it. Like, I used to really detest immersion reading. I was like, who on earth can do this? This is way too much. And now I found that I really do like it, because it just gives me the best of both worlds. And then my ADD brain can just settle in.
Actually, there's a certain circumstance that I really like immersion reading. I don't like it for most of the time. That's because fair. When I find, so I'm already listening to the book at like 1.25 speed. That's my like preferred speed.
Okay, I'm a faster
for audiobook.
Yeah.
Any faster, and my ears don't pick it up, and I miss too many things.
Yeah.
But I read physically faster than that. And so it is almost like I'm forcing my eyes to read slower when doing it, which for some cases is good. I did that for Malazan, the Gardens of the Moon. First book is it forces me to actually slow down and read it, which I think is helpful for that book
For
specifically.
sure. Yeah. I'm a 2-speed reader.
Times
for the
2?
most part. Times 2.
Oh Lord.
Yeah,
How?
on certain books like ACOTAR, I can do a 2.5 because I find it really depends on the genre for me, and it's all practice. Like it's really practice. And
Do you mind?
How does your brain?
I'm gonna play 2-speed real quick into
I
the
will
mic
say,
just to see.
I
The
will say
pitch is
it's
different.
when you're listening, just like with it blaring out of your phone versus when you've got headphones in. It's very different.
Can I play it just to see? I'm so curious because I do 1.3. Let's see. Okay, here we go. This is what again. It's not through headphones, but this is it.
Really, Carl? You need to pay attention to how the party system works. Once he's just a minion of me, it lets me make clockwork versions. Carl, well, shit.
You're insane. What channel are we on? What is this?
Hold on.
Oh, this is ACOTAR.
No,
yeah.
This is ACOTAR at I don't think they go. The highest speed they have is 3.
It's 3.
So 2.5 speed.
Chapter 6. The estate sprawled across a rolling green land. I've never seen anything like it. Even our former manor couldn't compare. It was veiled in roses and ivy, with patios and balconies and staircases sprouting from its alabaster sides. The ground
Is that
was encased by woods
2.5?
that stretched so far that I could barely see the distant line of the forest.
Oh my
So much
goodness.
color, so much sunlight and movement and texture.
Actually, that one's not as bad as Dungeon Crawler.
This is what I'm saying. It's
that one's not as bad.
Specific. It's very genre specific, and I will sometimes even find it's book specific. Like when I'm listening to an Abercrombie book, I'm usually at a 1.5 to 1.75. Also, just because I enjoy those books so much that I'm like, I don't feel like I need to rush through this experience. I want to really immerse myself. But if it's something, I don't want to say frivolous, but lighter, like an ACOTAR type read, I'm like, I can listen quicker and I still digest the information the same way that I would if it was, just whatever. So it really does depend. But
this is just jealousy because we want to read books faster too. We're trying. We're projecting right now. That's insane that you were able to pick up on that because I've done this as well because people when they watch our videos, I'm sure they watch other videos on YouTube, they'll do the YouTube speed at like times whatever. Especially we have a podcast, it's a longer form, so it's your videos are probably way more digestible. Ours are these longer, hour plus long. So when someone's listening, they'll go on 1.5. Some people tell us they do 2 times speed. So sometimes when I'm listening back to our episodes, I'll go 1.5, 2 speeds just to play it. And then I'll pause and then go back to 1 time speed. And it sounds like our normal cadence is so slow in comparison.
Slow.
To when you go to 1.3 on an audiobook, when you start getting those higher numbers, and you go back to 1, it's almost unbearable. It's
that is the case. I can't do one speed. I do 1.25. I can't go back. So I wonder maybe that's just something I have to train. That I should start doing 1.5.
You really do train it. And that's like if you can do it where you start at 1.25 and then you do 1.3 for like 15 minutes and then you do 1.35 for 15 minutes, like you just slowly build and you'll notice before no time you're like, oh yeah, this is fine. And you just get it to a point where you're like, yep. And
let's get to 1.5 by August.
Okay,
let's try for that.
I'll try it out.
See, because right now I did the same.
I'm not doing it for Dungeon Crawler, Carl.
No. Enjoy. Yeah.
That's an experience. I want to hear all of the pauses and the correct pitch. That's important.
That's awesome. Okay, so a series that I've been loving lately that I tell everyone to read, regardless if they want to or not, is the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, which is a semi-historical fiction. I call it historical fantasy because it's an Arthurian retelling, but it is the best trilogy I've read possibly ever. It is so good. And in terms of having that epicness that Rich likes, it definitely has that. It's got that epic story. It doesn't take place from the perspective of Arthur. It takes place from the perspective of this guy named Derval, who is a soldier and warrior alongside Arthur. And it has that action sequence, but all in all, great character development that Austin will like. So it is a
Ooh.
perfect combination for the two of you. It's excellent. It's so
Wow.
good.
This is not so.
Oh Lord, that
so
is
also it's not super well known. This
It's
is
it's not as well known as it should be. I'm doing my best here, guys, to spread the
Wow.
word on YouTube.
That's how books get popular. They're not going to get popular by just an advertisement on some Facebook page. That's how
Right?
it happens. So that
Hey,
that's
a
a
cool-
unique. Gwyn, one of the Gwyn brothers, also rated it 5 stars. Okay,
So
this
John
is
Gwynn
great.
was heavily influenced by that series for Malice. Like a lot of the
What?
themes he took from Malice are
Oh.
from that trilogy.
That's awesome. Okay.
Wow.
Whoa, did I read that right? 1,600 pages.
That's the trilogy.
Oh, that's the trilogy.
Yeah.
Trilogy. Yes.
Okay.
No,
I didn't know what you had us getting into. Okay, that's way more manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that looks great.
What's the first book called? It's called
The Winter King is the first one.
The Winter
Then
King.
Enemy of God is book 2 and Excalibur is book 3. And they are all perfection. They're so good. I will say Winter King started a little rough for me about like the first 100 pages. And everyone was like, it's smooth sailing once you get it beyond this first 100 pages. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. They were not kidding. The book 2 is possibly the best book I've ever read. It's so good. I have been just on a high since reading these books. I keep telling everybody, I'm like, guys, please go read this series. It's incredible. So
Wow.
if you're looking for something that could be an interesting experience for the both of you, but for different reasons, Warlord Chronicles for sure.
We're definitely putting that on our TBR.
Yeah,
Try and get to that sooner rather than later.
And now looking at it, I do recognize that cover. You don't
Yeah.
have it, do you?
I may have it.
You might accidentally have that
I may
book.
have bought it for like I go to used bookstore hall and
Yeah.
a friend said like, hey, pick this up, and I may have already picked it up.
Yes. Claude Simeon, the audiobook narration for this book too is by Jonathan Keeble, and it is incredible. It is so good. He does such a good job. Like I cannot say enough good things about this series, guys.
Okay.
Did you guys meet in college before? Like I completely forget the conversation we were having earlier. Is that where you guys met?
Yeah.
Yes, freshman year of college. Yep. And so my roommate was his high school friend. So he would come to our dorm and to his high school buddy, be like, hey, let's go do something. And that's how I met Rich.
Nice.
Yeah. Then we started playing poker together, and we had a poker group. And
now
that
you work
poker
with
group,
each other.
Slowly we're turning that poker group into reading group. We're infecting our friends quite a bit.
Isn't that the best?
Finished part 1 of Golden Sun.
Oh,
and he's
great.
Yeah. So it is you've read Red Rising, maybe?
So here's the thing.
All right. I think I see it on that shelf back there.
You do. And I have both very positive and very negative things to say. The first 3 books, excellent. Love them. Like perfection. I finished Dark Age last month, and it is possibly the biggest disappointment of a book that I've ever had. I hated it. So
Dark Age, not Iron Gold.
I also disliked Iron Gold, but not as much as I disliked Dark Age, because that was like a really bad experience for me.
Without spoiling, can you give us why? What thing about
for
it?
Me, the original 3 books are a beautiful blending of plot and character work. It's good levels of action, but more than anything, I feel like it's character development especially in books 1 and 3, I would say, because there is a death that happens in Morningstar, and the reactions to that death are so well done and executed that I'm like, this is perfect. Like, this is so good. My issue with Dark Age with Iron Gold, I felt like tonally it was a bit too different. I wish that we maybe would have had book 3.5 to kind of justify why people are doing things that they're doing and how that 10 years has affected them in that way. But with Dark Age, I was like, we are just tossing character work out the window, and it feels like everything is shock value. And there wasn't enough time given to things to actually process them. In the original 3 books, when a death happened, it was infrequent enough that you were given the time to mourn that with the characters and grieve with them and experience that with them. Dark Age was like every 3 chapters we're dropping people and you're getting no time, none. And for me, like, I don't care if a book has darker or overtones and themes. I just want to feel like I can immerse myself with the characters, relate to how they're feeling, and work through it with them. And it felt like a Marvel movie where it became very tropish. There wasn't enough depth that was happening, at least for me. And my major thing was that there, in the first 3, we have a very distinct and clear bad guy. Like, this is the bad. And in this book, he's like, I'm going to introduce 10 new bad guys, and none of them are going to be fleshed out properly. Good luck. And I was like, this is a lot. So that's why I had a very hard time with it.
Did you read on to Lightbringer after that?
I have not read it yet. I am buddy reading it with my friend in August. She and I both had the same reaction and felt like we both needed a little bit of space just to let it breathe a little bit, to not go into Lightbringer with negative feelings. Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective, and I do kind of get it. I definitely. Hey, Digger Dan.
Hey, Dan.
I do like, so to some degree, I do agree with you that it is definitely heightened on the shock value.
Yeah.
In Dark Age. That's true. For me, that it's a positive compared to Golden Sun, or not Golden Sun, compared to Iron Gold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there was some really great character work with Darrow, of seeing him at,
spoiler light.
Well,
shouldn't even mention characters because if they,
I guess, but come on, Darrow.
Hey, anyone could go. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
I think people know. Darrow is our guy.
he's the guy. He's the man. But no, you get to see a character that's falling pretty. You get to see some of the low points of a bunch of different characters as well. And so yes, it's not all contained in one book, and at least it feels kind of like a character arc that's spread over 3 books, which, take it or leave it what you will. Like, to some people that can be very unsatisfying if the character arc is not, like, you only see one section of the character arc in the book, and you feel like, come on, get on it. So I get that. But thing is, I love Wheel of Time. And
yeah, I know you did.
So stretching a character arc over multiple books, I'm okay with. You could stretch that same character arc over 10 books. I'm good.
I just have to put my little word in here that I'm curious about what you think as well about the prose of Dark Age. The character work and the plot. I could definitely see, for me, Red Rising is one of those things where it's such peaks and valleys, where there's books in that series that I will die for, and there's others that just miss the mark enough to where it's like, it's so frustrating, because I think Pierce Brown has all the pieces there that could make this into, like, so it could elevate some things to masterpiece level for me. So maybe you disagree. My more disappointing books were Iron Gold and Morning Star, whereas I found Golden Sun, Red Rising, and Dark Age for me. Like, Dark Age for me, it's like a masterpiece. I love that book. And I just had to say that in case Pierce ever comes and sees this. I'm with you, Pierce. She's wrong.
That's the thing. I felt like, I love Pierce, and I felt personally betrayed by him as I was reading Dark Age. I was like, what is happening here? But so for me, everyone warned me when I went into reading Red Rising, because I just read it this year. So it's very recent. I read the first 3 in April. I read them back to back. I'm a binger. If there's a series that's out, like, I usually do the whole thing. And I really enjoyed Red Rising. Everyone was like, it's mid. And I was like, this is not mid, guys. This is a great book. And had an awesome time with it. Like, the first 30%, so part of when I'm reading, and this is very much a me thing, this is not a universal thing, I struggle if I cannot place a book in a genre, because I feel like mentally I'm preparing for certain expectations while I'm reading. And I was struggling for the first third, because I was like, is this YA or is it adult? Because Darrow at the beginning of Red Rising is 16, so it's reading YA because our protagonist is technically a YA character. But I was like, once you hit that 30% mark, I was like, no, we're in an adult series. Like, I feel very cemented now in what's happening. So once I got over that first 30%, I was like, I'm in. Like, this is great. And I loved it. I am of the opinion that Golden Sun, while very, very good, for me, wasn't as good as book one. Like, I liked book one more, which I know is a controversial opinion. But then I liked Morningstar on par with Red Rising. Like, I really liked Morningstar. There's one scene in particular at the very end that irks me in Morningstar, but
we know the scene.
You know the scene. And it's also because I called it at the very beginning of the book. Like, I was messaging a friend when it was happening. I was like, this is what this is. And I don't like it because I don't like it at any book. I just don't. And everything else about that book for me was excellent. Like, I really, really loved it. And I felt like the first three books as a whole were so well done in terms of class and struggle and the stratas of society and the concepts that we feed people to ingratiate them to beliefs and fighting oppression and what it feels like to question humanity. Because Darrow's whole journey is viewing Golds as one thing his whole life, as this antagonistic group, and becoming one of them and assimilating and questioning whether or not all of these people are bad. Like, that to me was what made the first three books so good, because I was like, it's this struggle of trying to retain who you are and not become the them, but realizing that you are now a balance of both. And I feel like so much of that essence was lost in Iron Gold and Dark Age, where it's become very much a hardened character, which is appropriate when you've been at war for 10 years. But the essence of a lot of these characters, of who they were at the point that we left them, it felt very jarring to me. I was like, I need to know why we are now making decisions like this when we used to make decisions like this. And I struggled deeply with that. And for me, there was only one character in Dark Age that I felt made decisions that was akin to the first three books. So that for me is where I struggle. If the characters and I aren't jiving, I'm like, we need more talking here. Like, we need to get this flow back and working. But I know that's not for everybody. Like, I'm a very character focused reader. So for me, that is the most important thing.
You know, I do see another book back there that I think does Red Rising, but then adds all the things that you want and you're talking about to the 11th degree, Empire of Silence.
I haven't read it yet. It's on my shelf, but I'm excited to read it. Yeah.
It's a more character focused. It's a more character focused Red Rising. Is what it should like. Well, Dune, kind of. It's like Dune Red Rising, but then lots of talky talk with characters and going real deep into who the character is.
I like that.
And what do they believe, and seeing how these things are tested and seeing how their ideals are broken or rebuilt and all that stuff.
Sure.
Wonderful.
So Austin, what is it about Red Rising that you love so very much?
And how spoilery? What line should I straddle here when talking Red Rising?
Be relatively vague.
Okay. I will be as vague as possible. So what is it about the series as a whole, or the very first book about what hooked me?
Whichever, both.
Start with the book, then go with the series.
I would say when it comes to just the first book and starting me off in this world, I love a couple things about books. One, character focused, I absolutely love. But if you can start me off with a character who has some sort of an extremely active protagonist, a protagonist that almost skips over the plot that all other books would have drawn out and given you a 13-book long Dan is here continuing Wheel of Time with Rich. Dan, he's all yours. Okay. So
I'm also not a Wheel of Timer, so I get it.
I look, so something that I appreciate about novellas and short stories are it gets to the point. And so the thing about Red Rising, just what Pierce Brown did of skipping all the stuff that I wouldn't want to read. Like I hadn't had that experience with a book in a long time. Like, yes, there are the thought-provoking books. There are the ones that can make you sit and think and they will stick with you for a long time. But it's been so long since I'd read a book to where I actually had to continue every chapter, to where I actually had to go, okay, you just ended that. Oh, you dirty dog. And then continue on and just keep going. So I couldn't stop putting it down because when it came to his plot, every single cut and action, he didn't skip a beat. And because of Darrow's character being the very active and rash character he is, so it made so much sense with the plot to just go right to the finish line. So I had to keep going. So it got me so addictive into it where you love those books where you're up till 3 a.m. finishing.
Oh yeah.
It's one of those. And so that Red Rising did that for me. Golden Sun did that for me. I could go into more spoiler. I'd love to go into spoilers sometime, but to not spoil Morningstar, to keep this very light, why there's such peaks and valleys, because I think Golden Sun, Red Rising to me are 5 out of 5. I love them. Love them. Yeah. Morningstar disappointed me a little bit because that whole thing I'm saying that I just loved, the reaction from book 2 to book 3 and the thing that happens with character, the reaction from character after book 2 to book 3, after the first couple chapters of he gets out of thing that character was in, right? I thought that I have to keep it super vague. I want to talk about the reaction to that, the character that I thought this character was to what they did in book 3. I had this whole mindset of 2 books was built up that he was like this, and this was finally the moment to see some intense consequence to that. But then this character ended up being the moral lesson to another side character who ended up teaching side character after this character went through character issue in the first couple. I'll stop, but I just want to talk
about this off screen because
off screen. Yeah,
your expectations of the character.
Expectations of character went a different direction. Different direction. But anyways, I love it so much because nothing's had me a character that has such clear, it's almost too easy to such clear flaws, wants, needs. The motivation clear from the get-go. There's no questioning what their motivation is, and just pushing you through the plot at breakneck speed. Love that. So that's one of the things that I love about the series.
So it's funny because that is sort of the opposite of Stormlight Archive.
Oh yeah.
100% the opposite. So I feel like just a general guess would be that Rich, you really like Kaladin. Would Kaladin be your type of character, or would you be more of a Dalinar type guy?
Dalinar is my favorite.
We're both Dalinar.
Yeah. Dalinar is also my favorite. I love Dalinar very, very much. I actually struggle quite a bit with Kaladin, which is another hot take that I have. Way of Kings is my least favorite of the 4 Stormlight books.
Same here, but for different reasons.
So I went in with very specific expectations, I feel because I read all of the Cosmere last year except Sunlit Man. It's the only book that I did not read last year of the Cosmere. And
all 41 too, all the 40 of them?
It's
I don't think it's 40.
It's not 40. No.
It's not 40.
You're thinking
books? Yeah, you're thinking
Discworld.
Oh,
Discworld's 42.
Discworld I think 41. Is 41.
Yep. 41.
And Stormlight I think is 24, 25.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And so Kaladin is best boy. So for me, Adolin is the best boy. He's a golden retriever of some
correct.
Kind. Yeah.
Correct opinion. Adolin is best
yes,
boy.
He is.
Yeah, I love him so much. So for me, I went in with this expectation of Stormlight being sort of similar to his other books that I had read so far. And I was like, oh, this is nothing like his other books that I've read so far. How am I feeling about this? And I found that I really struggled with Kaladin for certain reasons. And Shalon made me want to rip my hair out. I was like, you're killing me. Every time I got to her chapters, I was like, I can't take this. I cannot take this. But then I got to Words of Radiance and I was like, this is a masterpiece. It was the whole thing from start to finish was so good that I was like, I'm here for this series, guys. Like, I'm living for it. And by this point, I was pretty firm in being, for of the female characters, I was like, Yasna Colin is my spirit animal, so I love her. And then Dalinar, I just love. Like, he's great. And then everyone was like, God, get ready for Oathbringer. It's a slog. And I was like, it's a book about Dalinar, guys. Like, I'm pretty jazzed about this. I don't know what you're talking about. And I loved Oathbringer. I thought it was another 5-star read. So it was.
If you had to pick that or Words of Radiance, what's your favorite?
Oh, I do think it's still Words of Radiance.
Okay.
Because of the fact that, first of all, the prologue is Yasna, which like makes me so excited. And I was like, okay, we're starting off great. But that book completely changed my opinion about Shallan. And I was like, I was expecting to hate this character till the end. Like I was like, we're done. I don't even know why you're still talking. I can't deal with you. And as soon as her chapter showed up in Words of Radiance, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I like you now. What is happening here? And it was such a weird reading experience to have such a 180 on a character that I don't think I've ever had that, in terms of just drastically dreading when someone was being on the page to actively being excited to read their chapters. And
fair point.
I just loved that whole book. The dynamic between the people that we start getting, like between Kaladin and Adolin, was really good. The relationship between Adolin and Shallan, Shallan's relationship with like all of the people really was so good. And Dalinar starting to get a little bit deeper with him in Words of Radiance was excellent. And then that just sets everything up so beautifully for Oathbringer. So yeah, I love them.
And you read Rhythm of War as well?
I have. Yeah, I have.
So book 5, we are all bagging. We are waiting for that to come out.
I'm real excited.
Another important question. Are you going to Dragonsteel this year?
I was going to go, but then my husband and I decided that we're going to go to Ireland instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some of us like to go in the middle of Utah for vacation.
Right? Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I would love to go to Utah. I've been nagging my husband to go for years, but I really want to go in warmer months because we love hiking and I'm a photographer. So I'm like, I actually want to like go be able to do the parks. Like, that's what I want to be doing. And I'm worried about how busy it's going to be this year because the book is coming out. I'm like, it's going to be mayhem. And I mean, I'm excited for the people that are going because it's for sure going to be a really fun experience. But personality wise, for me, I'm like, I know I'd get the book and be like, I'm itching to read this and not socialize right now. And I'm being forced to socialize.
I am really hoping that the one benefit I've wanted since we started this YouTube channel, like from the very beginning, was I want an ARC copy of Stormlight 5.
Right?
That's from day one, from our first upload. That was like, if we get that, then the whole thing's a success.
It's worth it.
Because then we could read the ARC copy before going, and then we won't have that problem of getting the book and going, but I want to do the things at the event. I want to read.
I hope they give it to us at the end. They won't, but I hope they do.
Yeah, I hope they don't actually give us the book until the end of the event.
It's the last thing of the event. Hey, go on your flight home where you can read the whole flight.
Listen, exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking. So, I'm sure at some point I'll go, but it's not going to be this year. Maybe it'll be like for Stormlight 6 in 10 years.
That's going to be a while. Yeah.
It's gonna be a while, but
he's earned. He's earned a break from Stormlight after this.
That's the thing, like, people are freaking out about it, whereas I read A Song of Ice and Fire many, many years ago, and I'm like, we're still waiting. I'm like, Sanderson, we know, is going to be writing other things. So it's not like he's just not writing, guys. Like,
yeah.
Which Stormlight 6 might be even more of a mob fest than Stormlight 5, because with the 10-year gap of the popularity of the first 5 growing, then going, hey, look, Sanderson coming back to the Stormlight 6 might be even more of a imagine there's also adaptations coming out, and there's a Stormlight. Maybe they're on like movie 3 as he's starting book 6. Who knows?
I don't think it'll be like a 10-year literal 10-year gap in our time.
It is supposed to be a literal 10-year gap in our time. Yes.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a decade.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just I thought it was closer to like 5 years.
No. So I think he said that this is flexible. Like he has been very open with the fact that if he wants to get back to that universe sooner, then he will. But his laid out plan was that he wanted to basically binge write the next era of Mistborn. He wanted to work on Elantris 2 and 3. He wants to do the Rock Eater novella. And then I think there was like maybe another novella in there as well. And I feel like I'm missing one or two because I mean he's got like a million books that he wants to write.
I think he wanted to do something with he had a wit book a long time ago that was unfinished, and so more of a Cosmere focused book with wit. I think that was also on the docket. Can't remember though.
He can write those over here. I wish he was writing a sequel to Warbreaker because Warbreaker is my favorite Cosmere novel. I love Warbreaker so much.
Warbreaker's amazing.
It's great. I just want Warbreaker 2. If I could have, I mean, here's the thing. It won't be this because it can't be. But if I could have a whole book of Light Song and Nightblood, I would be the happiest person alive. Like I would just be giddy the whole time. Hey, Daniel. So that would be great for me. Do you guys have a favorite Cosmere book? Is it something from Stormlight? Is it external to Stormlight?
Different for Rich. You have a favorite that is a very short book.
Emperor's Soul.
Oh, it's so good.
It's my favorite thing that he's ever written. I think one, it shows the excellence of prose that
he can do. Yes,
he can do masterful prose. Masterful.
He's just he's giving himself a debuff. He's allowing other writers.
Yeah, no, I get it. Honestly, you can't. Well, Patrick Ruffus is a great example of doing an epic fantasy, but in the intense focus on prose.
Sure,
it takes forever. And in all honesty, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, but it's important to also go with the plot and the story and immerse you in the world. Like there is a sense that you run the risk of a very purple prose or a really well thought out prose can sometimes take you out of the story, rather than with Stormlight, it's a very simple prose and you're in the world.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I get the balance between it, but Emperor's Soul is just a wonderful message where I think it's masterful in character work. Magic system is my favorite magic system that he has. And then the idea, like the focus on the idea of what is art, and personally a look on motherhood is I think is a really interesting perspective and interesting story to tell there, which I'll save it for other times. But Austin, what's your favorite?
Oh, Emperor's Soul is great. That is
is it Oathbringer?
Yeah, it's Oathbringer. yeah. She's like, just cut the crap. It's Oathbringer. Get to the point there, yeah, it's Oathbringer. And I think number 2 would then be the next Stormlight, then the next Stormlight, then the next Stormlight. But then it would
He hasn't read Mistborn yet.
Not yet.
Really?
I know.
I'm 100 or so pages in the first book right now. So I'm just getting into that. I would go Stormlight, Oathbringer, then a couple, but then Rhythm of War, I wouldn't say. I think that takes a bottom leap to things like Warbreaker, which is great, and then Emperor's Soul, which is great. So there's some in between there, but Stormlight takes a lot of the top spots for me.
That's fair, honestly. So my reading experience with Sanderson is that I started with Mistborn Era 1, and then I did Elantris, Warbreaker, Mistborn Secret Histories, and then I did Way of Kings. And after I finished Way of Kings, I was like, I need a break from this. Like, this is a lot. And Tress had just come out, and I got my copy of Tress, and I was like, this is phenomenal. Like, I loved Tress so much because also I love The Princess Bride. Like, Princess Bride for me is a 5-star read. I love the film so much. And Tress is that, but just as good. And I was like, okay, we're back. Like, we're back with this, and this is great.
Did you read Yumi?
I did read Yumi. I still prefer Tress.
Okay.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that something that happens at the end of Yumi should not have happened, and it should have been the opposite. And I'm like, it would have been more impactful had it been that way for me. I know why he did it the way that he did, but it just wasn't as good. But the artwork in Yumi is friggin' incredible. If you got the Secret Project version, like so nice. Yeah, you've got them all displayed. Mine are Tresses right here. There is Yumi right next to it. And I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I will say in terms of immersing myself in a world, that one took me longer than some of his other stories have. I think it took me about to the 100-page mark where I was like, oh, okay. Like when we start getting the back and forth is when I really got immersed into the characters, the world, and started enjoying it. But the big difference for me was that I loved Hoid's voice in Tress. I loved Hoid's voice in Tress, and I struggled with his voice in Yumi. And I find that for a lot of my interactions with certain Stormlight books can depend on Hoid's voice if it's like a big presence in the part of the book, which is partially why Words of Radiance is so high for me, because the story that he tells Kaladin about the runner is one of my favorite things in the Cosmere as a whole. I loved it so much. So Hoid is influential. He's an influencer for sure.
Is one of your favorites as well the book 4, Dog and Dragon? With what? Do you remember?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a highlight of the book for me.
Yeah, I love that moment. There's a lot of those special ones, like you mentioned in Words of Radiance, where he just has these great moral lessons compact into the overall theme. Amazing.
Yeah, that for me, honestly, my favorite part of Way of Kings was the story that he tells Kaladin about like the castle and the people and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, this is what's so good. Like I need this. I want a whole book of this. And I love that. So if I can get more of that, like that's the atmospheric stuff that I'm talking about, right? Like Hoid, because he's a storyteller, will set that setting for me. Apparently I got really excited about Hoid just will set that atmosphere for me in a way that other parts of Stormlight doesn't necessarily do. But yeah, Hoid's voice for me can really influence how I feel overall about a book. But I'm curious what you're thinking so far about Mistborn, because it's interesting to go from Stormlight to Mistborn.
Yeah, so I'm early on to where again, I can't even spoil much because I haven't finished the book, but seeing Kelsier and seems very charismatic, and I know it's a heist book, and a lot of Sanderson's lectures, when he uses an example, he'll refer to Mistborn as him constructing a plot. So I can get the inkling when I'm reading Mistborn that this is more of your typical book. I'm getting the sense that it's not going to shock me with anything crazy. It's going to have probably your heist twist that happens, like, your typical heist story. But I feel like it's going to rely a lot on Kelsier and the team that's forging together, and how much I'll either love them or not. And right now I'm enjoying it.
Do you have favorite team members? Because I have very distinctive favorite team members.
Not yet. Not yet. But I will TBD on that.
How about you, Rich? Do you have favorite Mistborn team members?
I don't know if I can bring up the character. I don't think he's come across him yet.
Okay.
Or it has, because I think that would be a spoiler if I mentioned that character. But it's a character that gets a little bit more page time in book 3.
And
kind of goes to their own. Okay. Quite enjoy that character, and then of course, I really like Marsh.
Marsh is one of my two. I love Marsh.
Those two characters for me are top tier.
I think you've probably met my other favorite one, and that's Breeze. He's a soother and he's hilarious. I greatly enjoy him, but I'm excited for you. You'll have to definitely keep me posted on whether or not you were shocked or surprised by anything.
Hey, I'm saying that I shouldn't be saying that about Sanderson. Sanderson can do anything. He could surprise me. So
I think you're in store for a couple shocks.
Okay, very nice. Oh yeah, he can definitely show. Oh, let's see what's Dan saying. This is not a hot take, but I thought Mistborn was mid. All the magic system. Ooh, okay,
I don't think
Dan.
this is a hot take. Honestly, I think a lot of people are starting to come out of the woodwork like this. I will say, I really enjoyed book 1. I loved Well of Ascension, which is book 2. I think Well of Ascension is the best of the 3 books, which is my hot take. I thought the ending for this series was a letdown. And that is a very hot take. Because of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, most people really love the ending, I feel like, of Mistborn. For me, it felt a lot of Mistborn felt very tropish. And I don't know if that's because it's earlier in his writing career as compared to Stormlight, where I feel like because that is such a bigger story and epic that he's veered away from a lot of those tropes, that it just didn't hit for me the same way that something like Stormlight does.
Oh, I guess that's my impression of it, is that it definitely leans more into the tropes, but I think I'm assuming it just does them really well. So I don't think trope is such a negative term. It's more when it turns into that cliche. Maybe you felt that way, where it just kind of felt like you read that before. But apparently that's a hot take.
I actually agree with you. I like Well of Ascension the most out of the trilogy.
Oh, so good.
No, it's combination of one, I just like the character work done in that. So character work I think is better. The plot is more shocking, fast paced. Like I just vibed with it more. And then ultimately for me, the ending of book 2 blew my mind.
So
and
good.
Then book 3 has some great elements that continue on, but kind of in agreement with you. I like the ending of book 3, but kind of how we get there felt a little tropey, and maybe not even just tropey, it's cliche.
Yes. Book 2 for me was a 5-star read. Like it's funny because until that point, right, we kind of have this second book syndrome, like second album syndrome, where it's like it's never as good as the first one. And I simply have found over the last 2 years, I'm reading a lot of really good book 2s. I feel like book 2s aren't being given the praise that we should be giving them. And Well of Ascension was the first one for me where I was like, guys, this is a book 2 that everyone should be really psyched about. And with like Golden Sun, right? It's like, it's a book 2 with the Warlord Chronicles that I read earlier. Enemy of God is book 2, and it's like the best book ever. I'm like, book 2, like there's a lot of solid book 2s that are coming out of the woodwork here, and I'm psyched about it.
It feels like authors kind of get the rhythm by that second one.
Yes.
Where you're just introducing a world. Now you kind of have the grounding and the settings there. So now you can kind of just go Words of Radiance. You're another book 2 that you just floored.
Exactly. So fast-paced book 2. I mean, here's the thing with Wall of Ascension. The last part of the book is fast-paced, but it's a very politic-heavy book, which I really like because I love politics and fantasy. That for me is something that I really enjoy. I
guess that's what I meant is I felt like always something was going on. Maybe not a big action scene, but for me, the pace was pretty fast. There's always a new threat. The characters are doing something. It's not necessarily that it's fast as in action. But.
Yeah, The Great Hunt is a good book too. It is a very good book too.
Dan. Correct.
So I have only read the first 3 Wheel of Time books, and without a doubt, The Great Hunt is the best one. Like,
did you stop after book 3?
I did. Yeah.
Why's that?
So it took me several times to get through Eye of the World, like several times, and I talk about this pretty regularly on my channel in that. I feel that Robert Jordan does certain things very, very well. Specifically, his lore and world building, I think, are probably the best that I've encountered. My struggle with Jordan is his character work, in that I feel he does not know how to write female characters at all. And that a lot of the tropes that the characters go through feel very pedantic and repetitive. I'm like, I get it. Like, I don't need this series to be 13 or 14 books. This series to me is 5 books. Like, let's move this along here. Which for someone like Rich, he's like, oh, that's great. This is exactly what I want. For me, I'm like, I get it. Like, let's move on. I get it. So for me, when I was reading it, it took me a few tries. And then I finally did the audiobook for it. And I found that audio worked for me for that series. I did the first 3. And then I was holding off on doing the 4th book until the next season of the show came out, because I was doing a live stream where I would compare the show and the book. But I think my hot take for Wheel of Time, for most of the conversations that I have with people, is that Wheel of Time, I think, is influenced, your relation to it is influenced as to where it came to you in your reading journey. So I feel like a lot of people, if Wheel of Time is their first epic fantasy, it's going to have that sentimental value and that place in their heart where they're like, this is my standard. Whereas I had already read A Song of Ice and Fire, and I had already read Neil Gaiman and like high fantasy, epic fantasy. And then I read this and I was like, this doesn't work for me in the same way that it's working for other people. But I understand why it could work for them in that way. I just think it depends your age, where you are in your reading journey, where you are into your foray with fantasy specifically, that can very much influence what your relationship with that series is going to be. But that can be said about most series in general.
I tend to agree with you on quite a few of those points, especially book 1. Of book 1, I liked it well enough.
Yeah.
But I'm not crazy about book 1.
Sure.
And character work, definitely. Like I didn't like really any character except Perrin.
Same.
That was it.
Same.
I was like,
yeah,
Perrin's cool. Perrin's interesting. What's going on with the wolf thing?
Yep.
Cool. Let's continue.
Yeah.
Book 2 changed a lot of that for me. Of several more characters became incredibly more likable and interesting to me. Later on in the series, especially when it comes to female characters, I look at it, especially on this reread, that Jordan, I think he's missing the mark in the earlier books, but a couple books in, his female characters become some of my favorite characters in the series.
So many people say that. Far. Yeah, so many people say that.
That's not because they're very unique. Like, I get the characters are written in a way of a hyper tropish femininity. Like they are stereotype. A lot of them are stereotypes of what people imagine women to be.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find interesting is I think the exact same thing is about men. And men are like in the story are stereotypical men. And they're both of these extremes. And what's wonderful is seeing how those extreme stereotypes of men and women play off of each other, and then eventually how they work together in different contexts. And so you go around the world and you see how it plays out in, the same melody, different harmonies. Whatever it is, different key. But
that's a good point. And a lot of fantasy stories focus on class or race or magic separating people. There aren't, how many others are out there where the magic system of Wheel Time's also emphasizing the difference with sex, not in, usually you see it's you versus the big government or big corporation or whatever the kind of class structure is. And having,
what's incredibly fun is when I'm reading the male's POV, and then you hear the women talk, and then you're in their position of like, man, these women, you're put into their head of like, man, they're so irritating and just frustrating. Then opposite side, now you're reading the female's POV, and you go, man, these men are dumb. My God. Like,
I felt that way about everybody when I read that book. I was like, you all are driving me crazy.
But that's the wonderful thing is I think he does a great job of putting you into different POVs and giving you a cool perspective on the exact same scenario. And so that's what I really enjoy about the series, where, Nynaeve is one of my favorite characters in fiction. And yes, she's incredibly flawed. completely get it.
I mean, here's the thing. So many people say that to me about Nynaeve. Like when I say our, I mean my husband and mine's best friends love Wheel of Time. Like obsessed. They have read it for the last 20, 25 years. Like they are in love with Wheel of Time. They are the ones that gifted me Eye of the World in the hopes that they would lure me into Wheel of Time's clutches. And I remember when I started it, my friend was hardcore Nynaeve. She's like, "You're gonna love Nynaeve," and I was like, "Okay." Like I remember when I was reading it, I was like, "Girlfriend's driving me nuts." Like I'm struggling hard with Nynaeve, and it's funny because so many people that I've encountered who love the series say that they really struggled with her the first time, and then on a reread, they're like, "Oh, I love her from the beginning." Or it's that she becomes their favorite character because they feel like she has this really tremendous arc. For me personally, I need to have that connection earlier in order to compel me to keep going. Like I appreciate people like you, Rich, who are like, I'm good. Like I can keep going with this where I'm like, I don't have that in me.
That's completely understandable.
Yeah.
I completely get it. And your point on where you read it in your reading journey.
Yeah.
I read Wheel of Time, I think almost directly after Stormlight Archive. Pretty soon afterwards. So very early on in my epic fantasy reading journey.
Yeah.
Definitely was a factor because a lot of the tropes weren't tired by then.
Right. Exactly.
And now, and it allowed me to get sucked in. That first book, each one had something to offer me, and the negatives weren't as prevalent. So then by the time I'm into it, and I'm falling in love with these characters that are keeping me around. But it's definitely true that for someone who's read a bunch of different stories and seen these different tropes done early on, it's not as grabbing and doesn't hold you in until like I completely get it if it's such a long series and expecting someone to wait 5, 6 books to get sucked into it. By then you're already, if you have 5 books where you're going, I'm not enjoying this, how the hell are you going to turn that around on a dime?
Exactly. For sure.
Yeah, where I think the weird thing is with Stormlight and how everybody can have the fandom is very dispersed with which is their favorite book.
Oh yeah.
I think that Words of Radiance is usually seen as the best. Rhythm of War, Way of Kings, I mean, it really varies on which works. Yeah. But then when talking Wheel of Time, it's almost universally agreed on your book 4, was it book 11, book 14, right?
Best books?
Some people love book 5. I know quite a few people that love book 5.
If you want the action. So some of the biggest moments and the shock, if you want that shock value of, oh, I didn't know you're allowed to do that.
Yes, book 5.
Book 5 is traumatic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Big stuff happens. It's rough.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a lot of people's big moments. For me, I loved book 4 because of the world building and the new direction the characters are going into.
Got it. But is that mainly true where the Wheel Time fans can get behind, like, these are the best of the books for...
Yeah. And the main thing is the reason why they're the best books is because it's the best moments that they like.
And they were built up for all these books.
Exactly. Those moments wouldn't be grand. So, like, there's a moment in book 11. It's one of my favorite moments in reading, period. On its own, it's fine. Like, I can see this scene in another book and being like, yeah, that's cool, fine. But being built up over 11 books and seeing where this character has gone.
Yeah.
And it's not oh, they went into the valley and then they coming back up. No, they've been in the valley a while. They've been, I haven't seen the light in a long time. And then you see crawling out, it's so much more glorious. It's the advantage of such a long series. That's
the thing. Yeah. You really can. An epic series, you're going to it's an opportunity to get to know characters in a way that you might not necessarily in another series, right? Because especially too, depending on how many POVs you have in a book can obviously, like for Red Rising, we really get to know Darrow over those first 3 books because it's a first person single POV series, which For me, I love a first person POV. I know that's not for everybody, but like first person automatically puts me in the feel of the character. So I love it. But I also can really appreciate something like Stormlight, where it's multi POV. But I love that Sanderson does this too, that he breaks up the book into sections where I know for chunks of time I'm going to be with specific characters. So I feel like it's not going too long without getting their introspection on an aspect of the plot of what's going on. Like I like that dynamic. That works well for me. But it's interesting and fun when you got those big series where you're like, settle in. I'm really going to get to know you over the next little while.
Absolutely.
That's why I love the Wheel of Time fandom in general. It's one of the only fandoms I've seen where when someone says, "Oh yeah, I really don't like it," Wheel of Time fans go, "I get it. I understand." They don't heavily defend, like they'll go, "Yeah, it's my favorite thing ever," but they don't defend it very well. Oh yeah, these books suck. 9 and 10, awful books. Still my favorite series. It's like, oh, I don't like it because of this aspect. Yeah, that's fair. Those characters do suck.
And the slog. People openly talk about the slog. That is a big thing.
My controversial opinion is the slog doesn't exist.
That is a hot take. Hot take.
That's fine. It's a hot take.
In terms of tropes, which is something that Wheel of Time has plenty of, is there a trope specifically that you guys get really excited about when you see that in the book and you're like, yes, like I love this. So what is the trope that really you're excited to read?
You go ahead.
Give me a redemption or failed redemption.
Oh, nice.
Day. And not spoiling anything, but you can tell from the things we've been talking about up to this point why some of my things I like more than others. But redemption arcs or failed redemption arcs, which I won't name characters, but in Stormlight you have both of those, and they're done perfectly. And I will eat that trope up all day. What about you, Rich?
The retired badass. I love it. I love it so much. Of the idea of an old man who, beware the old man in an industry where most die young, and I love that.
I also love a good mentor. I enjoy a good mentor trope, but for me, I love a motley crew or like a found family. Anytime there's a found family, I'm like, I'm here for the found family, guys.
That's fair. Yeah.
I love it because often I find that this is something I'm noticing over myself over the last year or so, that a lot of the time I end up enjoying the side characters more than the protagonist. And I'm like, it's because of that found family aspect and what they offer the protagonist. I'm just like, it fleshes out the world and the story in a way that I really appreciate.
Is there a worse trope, or is there a least favorite trope that you have that you just hate seeing in books?
Oh, least favorite. That's a good question. I'd have to think about it. So I feel like, okay, this is specific, but it's tangentially specific. I am really tired of the chosen one trope when the chosen one is 16 or 17 years old. Like that is a trope that I'm really tired of seeing because, for example, like I love Dalinar so very much. And in many ways, Dalinar could be a chosen one. And I love the fact that he is an older character. Like I love it because most of the time I feel like once characters in fantasy cross the threshold of 25, like they cease to exist. It's just, there's no story or plot to be written about them. And I really am excited to have more stories where our chosen one or our main protagonist in fantasy stories are these older chosen one characters. If you're 16, I'm over it. Like just 16 as a whole, I'm over it. I don't want it anymore. How about you?
Ooh, yours is
mine is, and I found out, I pinpointed this, my least favorite trope, because of Red Rising. It's the idea of when the book tells you the plan, that means the plan's going to fail.
Yeah.
But if they cut to black when they're like, okay, here's the plan, and then end chapter, I'm like, okay, the plan's going to work. Like there's going to be a twist and it's going to be a part of the plan.
Okay.
And I now can't unsee that. And it happens way too frequently.
That's funny. I never really thought about that, and you're right.
I just ruined it for you. You're
Yeah,
gonna
you
read a
did.
book and
How
go,
dare you?
just going, all right, here's the plan, guys. End chapter. I'm like, oh, now I
Yeah.
know what's gonna happen. Or if they start telling you the plan, you go, oh, this is gonna fail. Great. Now I know.
I think I'm with you on some of the. It's tough because every trope can be done right and correctly, but it's the ones you get really tired of, the ones that you kind of read a lot of. I think mine's maybe the farm boy, maybe like the very much from. I guess I like to see a chosen one or a protagonist that isn't like humble beginning, like small town, and then goes out and explores.
Sure.
I wouldn't even say that, like a Bilbo Baggins. I know that's a farm boy in the sense of like you're starting in the Shire and going out. I even like that more than I'm talking literal farm / village, random, like a nobody, nothing. I would rather have your starting area be just a bit more something to it. All to see, like, you see your before world and after world. I'd like that before world to just always have a little bit more spice. That's all.
Sure. Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like it would be an anti-hero chosen one. It would be so interesting, or someone that comes from like a city and is used to being in really dire situations, and it's like, and they're kind of forced to do these things. I don't know. I think that would be a really interesting way to go about it personally. Because
my goodness.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Sun Eater.
I'm gonna love it.
Fixes your problem. It's the answer to exactly what you're talking about.
I'm excited. Have both of you read Sun Eater, or is it just Rich?
Book one for me.
Okay.
I'm up to book 3 and I stopped. Book 3 is one of my favorite books of all time. It's my top 5.
Okay.
It's an arguably perfect book. I think it has the perfect pacing. So every chapter essential leaves off of I need to continue on.
Sure.
The character work is masterful. Masterful character work. The action is amazing. Plot twist, good balance of plot twists. Not too many of where everything is subverted, but important moments where a new twist. I cannot sing enough praises about that book. And so I'm waiting for Austin to catch up to me and then we can continue on.
Okay.
Because I know it's going to be one of his favorite books ever.
I'm excited.
It's what Red Rising should be.
Oh.
Those are some bold words. Would you say then, Austin, that you tend to prefer sci-fi over fantasy?
No, fantasy over sci-fi. And the reason I'd say that, I think Red Rising has more fantasy elements than it does all
I call
sci-fi.
it a sci-fantasy, honestly.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it. Yeah. I mean,
Rich and I, as much as we like to go over the Wheel-Time Red Rising is a clear difference, but one of the biggest similarities that we have is Discworld, where my favorite fantasies are Stormlight, Discworld, and then I'd say Red Rising is my third favorite series, just because it has those peaks and valleys. But for us, stuff like I love I think if I had to pinpoint my favorite genre or type of book, and this kind of translates in the movies too, I love fantasy because of how absurd it can be.
Satire.
I love absurdity nonsense that makes sense. So when you can make when you can get a thought-provoking message or a compelling story out of a character, which this is gobbledygook. How did you make me care? If you can present such absurd scenarios and make me care, that is the most genius types of films and books for me. And have you read Discworld? I mean, if that's your favorite type of novel.
I have read Going Postal. I am waiting. I have the beginnings of the death sequence of Discworld. I'm going to be reading that soon. It's sitting behind me here, and I am excited to get back into Discworld because I did enjoy Going Postal quite a bit.
Awesome. Going Postal is one of my favorite entries. I think it was my second Discworld book. I started with Small Gods, then Going Postal, and then I just started from the beginning. I was like, I'm in.
That's fair. That's fair.
You can read it out of order, and perfectly valid.
Yeah.
The one element that I liked from reading it from the chronologically is there are some cameo characters that pop in.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And so if you read it out of order, there's going to be a couple characters you miss, which I don't think is a big deal.
It's like the Cosmere.
Yeah. But it's kind of fun. It's also a interesting thing of spreading it out of like, hey, now I'm reading a death book. Now I'm reading a witch's book. And it keeps the palette
City Watch, you can switch it up. Yeah, for sure.
Rather than if I just read all the death books and then no more death books, I have to read the other ones. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love humor in fantasy. Like if humor is done correctly, which leads me to think you're really gonna like First Law because the humor is phenomenal in those books.
Funny books.
It's so good. Like within the first 10 minutes of reading First Law, I was cackling out loud. And it takes a good amount for me to laugh out loud with reading. I know for certain every time I pick up an Abercrombie book, there are going to be several laugh out loud moments, and they are all great. They are so, so, so fun. So you are really going to be in for a treat with that series.
Oh, amazing. I see. This whole, what is this called? The gush sesh, the love sesh.
Love bomb. Yeah.
Love bombing.
The love bombing. I think Rich and I need to have like weekly meetings, just 10-minute meetings going like, what are we loving? It's hyping me up.
Right?
To go read. It's giving me adrenaline.
Point. Exactly. It's to share with people your love of stuff and amp them up so you can all collectively love that stuff. Like, for people who love reading and love media in general, like for me personally, there are fewer things that are as endorphin inducing as someone coming up to me and being like, hey, remember that book you told me about? I read it and I friggin' loved it. I'm like, let's go. Like I get so amped to the point where I gift people books for Christmas, like that I think they'll like, that are one of my favorites. I'm like, this can be a conversation piece between us. Like it's really fun to share what you love with people. And because of the amorphous thing of the internet, you can share it with a bunch of people that you don't even personally know, which is like, I love because they might never have heard of Discworld or First Law or Sun Eater or Red Rising, you know? And it's like they then form a connection to that thing, but they also can form a connection to you because you are what introduced them to that thing. And it's a really cool experience to have. So
and how mind-blowing is that you change the trajectory of someone's life. That story hits them a certain way. And they think back to that book when it comes to moral questions or just what they tell others to do. And that's why Rich and I, the reason we're tied is we both made each other. I gave him the book I hadn't read and started his reading journey, and him reading so much got me to start my reading journey again. So we had this deep-seating feeling of guilt as if we owe the other time, and it should not exist. But it's just we kind of almost did that to each other by going like, oh, read this, and then piles in a bunch for me to read. So
it kind of, he started an avalanche, and he just saw me bringing home book. I think close to half my paycheck went to books.
Yeah,
because I was clearing, I think, roughly four books a week, 4 or 5 books a week.
Awesome.
And so I just kept going to the bookstore, and he would see me like bring home a stack of books. It's like you started this.
Sweating. Oh God.
I love it. I think it's great. Like that's been my husband and I, honestly, because we both read fantasy, and it's really cool and we both read sci-fi, to say this is something that I think you are really going to like, and simultaneously something I think I'm really going to like. And you can share that experience with someone that you're living with or someone that you're close with. Like, it's great. Like just having something to talk about that you are so passionate about is a really, really cool thing. And I think a lot of the time we lose that because we're in such a tech-based world now that like when you go into a waiting room, a lot of the time people aren't reading. You know, like they're on their phone. And it used to be like 15 years ago, most people they'd have a book in front of them. So now, like if I see someone reading a book, I'm like, I'm going to talk to you. Like I actively will talk to people that I see are reading. And just to like remind people that we can talk about these things and like create relationships and all that fun stuff because it's important.
Oh, you are right. The internet was a mistake. Completely agree. That's what you were getting at, right?
The internet, guys. Let's get rid of this whole conversation. It never happened. It's fine. So tell me, to wrap up, it'll be my final question for you guys. What is something that you haven't read yet, but is on the docket that you are really excited to read?
The thing I am most excited to read, and it's coming up here, I will be finishing it in early to mid-August, is Lonesome Dove.
Okay.
that one I'm really looking forward to. I've been wanting to read that for
It's been making the rounds on BookTube, so
oh yeah.
Besides the ones mentioned, so I've been so looking forward to Joe Abercrombie and First Law. So besides First Law and Sun Eater, which has been very much pitched and I will read, those are probably what I'm most excited for series wise. Other than that, I've just been meaning to, and it got re-emphasized to us recently by both our book club and by Nicholas Eames, who was who we chatted with a couple weeks ago. He wrote Kings of the Wild. And Guy Gavriel Kay. I've not read any Guy Gavriel Kay and Tigana, but more specifically Lions of El Rasan, which are standalones.
Read Lions. Oh, Lions is phenomenal. 5 out of 5. It's so good. It's
awesome.
I always say to people in terms of starting with GGK, it's starting with Lions is a great choice, but simultaneously a terrible choice because it's so good that it sets the bar so high. Wow. And you're like, it's everything in a book. The prologue of that book has you on the edge of your seat, and the finale in that book has you on the edge of your seat. And everything in between is excellent. It is a low magic world, which you don't even feel like you're missing anything because the setting and the atmosphere are so tangible and the characters are so real. It's such a good book. So I'm excited.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Same question for you then.
So I am really excited to read Sun Eater because I haven't forayed into Sun Eater yet. This has been a year of rereading for me, which I have never really allowed myself to do. And I'm finding that I'm really enjoying that. And I'm probably going to reread First Law because I finished all of the First Law books this year. But I read the original trilogy last year. So I might go back in and read the first 3 again, just so I can say, like, have a very clear picture in my head now and kind of rank them accordingly. I'm super excited for Stormlight 5. I'm really excited for that, obviously. Yeah. I feel like we're all really excited for Stormlight 5. But yeah, I'd say that, and I'm looking forward to trying Ken Liu because I haven't read him. So those would probably be, yes. Favorite Asher has been here the whole time. Those would probably be the ones that I am looking forward to the most.
Amazing. Yeah, I would say with Ken Liu, you don't even have to dive into the Grace of Kings. It's, again, 20 pages. Yeah. That's it, just to give you a taste of what you could get out of Ken Liu.
Sure. Yeah, I'm excited, honestly. Like, I'm not typically a short stories person. Like, that's not something I typically jive with. But so many people have praised that book that I'm like, I am going to read it. But let everyone know where they can find you. Most people know where they can find you, but just re-emphasize where people on the internet can find you.
2ToRamble on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods. You can check us out there. And also, we love coming on shows like this and just chatting here. So you could find us on all random YouTube channels around here with other booktubers.
Yeah, you can reaching out to, like, on Twitter or Instagram, all the same stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as always, everyone, thank you so much for spending your Friday night with us. I hope that you enjoyed our chat. If you liked this chat, feel free to hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you've been reading or watching lately that you've been loving. We have a Patreon now if you'd like to help support the channel. And I know that 2ToRamble also has a Patreon. So that's also something you can think about if you're looking to do that type of thing. As always, again, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And remember to talk to people about what you're loving, because it turns out they might love it too. And you can form a really great internet friendship or a real life friendship about it. So have a good night, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Laura. Bye, everybody.
Bye, all.
All right. We got to talk about